Okay. Here we go. Well, good evening, all you brave and hardy souls who found your way to tonight's program. And we really appreciate the second effort. And also, thanks to Steve Glines for his helpful technology. Okay, so we're going to start with Richard Fein and Richard's latest book of poems, which is his Bar Mitzvah volume, or number 13, is Dear Yiddish, appeared in 2023. He's also published 3 books of translations of Yiddish poets, as well as 3 books of prose. Robert Lowell, A Critical Study, The Dance of Leah, A Memoir of Yiddish, and Yiddish Genesis, a book of personal essays, and a new book of translations, The Poems of Moyshe-Leyb Halpern, is forthcoming. He's recently finished a new book of poems, The Polish Dream Machine. Richard, you are a regular poetry writing machine, so let's give a warm welcome to Richard Fein.
Thank you, Harris. Wonderful joy of camaraderie to read Marcia and together. The veil. In Exodus 34, Moses forgets to put on his veil, and people are frightened by the glare of his face. But then he remembers to put on the veil as he gives the people the laws from God, whom he speaks to face, without the veil. In 2 Corinthians chapter 3, Paul explains that Moses' veil separates the children of Israel from the true spirit, that veil in the way. But now we can take in the full presence of God, Paul explains. That veil now not in the way. In Book 4, stanza 3 of the Prelude, Wordsworth takes an evening walk around his little lake and finds that his soul has taken off her veil. He, naked, transformed with godlike power, breathes quiet rest surrounding him near the lake. Yet the veil plays its role, as in section 11 of Song of Myself, when the woman covers for Whitman as she peers from behind the blind at the naked men who are splashing about in the water, she hidden and Whitman hidden as the men's bodies glisten. And then I remember from childhood those rhombus eyelets of the veils on my aunts that segmented their faces, lozenge and randomly speckled netting, portioning the mystery of their faces. And Florence and Sarah and Jean. The next one is called Reading Yehosh's Yiddish translation of Genesis, which has an epilogue by the Yiddish poet Yaakov Gardner, who called Yehosh's entire translation of the Hebrew into Yiddish as the second original. His word. 1. Hinako Yiddish yakety yak. inside the cigar smoke. English and Yiddish foods and goods co-occupied wooden signs hinged out over the entranceways of stores and the near sidewalk. Wide stroke Yiddish was daubed across the glass canvas of a butcher store window. Sometimes an English sign inventively transliterated Yiddish, or a Yiddish sign inventively translated English. And then trans-language duplicates appeared, a kind of ovum cleavage, like kosher, as if the two words were fraternal words in some third language I carry around with me, whose words can go right-left or left-right, yet sound out the same sound. In this world of my childhood, suit-selling wisecracks are jingled up to macaronic commercials on WEBD, replayed so often they've needled themselves into my mind beyond will or desire. 2. All this spell of sound and lettering from my youth, accompanied by my scorn and fear of being tribalized, preceded my reading, Ich bin euer Bruder Joseph, I am your brother Joseph. Joseph crying on the neck of his brother Benjamin, and then of his other brothers. They who sold him, having been startled into and then out of speechlessness, reckoning that Yiddish dialect coming out of the vizier's mouth as proof positive of its brotherly claim, kiss him and cry their Yiddish wailing in the house of Pharaoh. 3. I concentrate my magnifying glass on the Yiddish letters as the focus seems to be branding them into the page. I never saw before the black ink of the print and the manila of the page so merged. The Joseph story, especially chapter 45, stamped into me, fleck by fleck, curve by curve. Ich bin euer Bruder Joseph. Egypt, France, America is where these Yiddish letters are augmenting themselves. I who am absorbing them. And through my rejections, attachments, I and they are turning into a second original. It's as if these Yiddish letters have rendered themselves anew. Their shapes as they always have been, and yet transfigured into flexings and intimations never suggested before. New gestures and inklings of themselves. Oh, uterus speech, and all those Yiddish poets I've translated into English emerge, rueful, forgiving, spurring me to bring across something of themselves. The next one is called Second Nehemiah. The original one, of course, in the Bible. Second Nehemiah. The Canaanites wore feathers in their hair, and you who made the seas and the winds, you who carried us to this destined land, you who equipped us with arquebuses and morions, and you who gave us the powers to possess with blessings of the words from your book. You have chosen us and have brought us in under your beating wings, their overlapping reach. Though even our wisest rulers have violated your laws, and we married out and ate proscribed foods and sacrificed on the ledges of forbidden cliffs. We envisioned land and drove in stakes in your name and arduously rebuilt your temple and altar and porches, and will be remembered for good and holiness in your name, long after those autochthons and their gaudy totems are gone. The Ammonites, the Zemarites, the Tekoites, the Gibeonites, the Ashdodites, the Meronothites, the Perizzites, the Amorites, the Jebusites, the Girgasites. I'll conclude with this one now. Called The Interview, 1959. During grad school, I moonlighted learning Yiddish. Taken by my translations of his poems, Yaakov Rivlin recommended me to Itzik Manga, residing in America now. Nervously fervent, eager to enter Yiddish and the world its poets came from, I went out to Coney Island to meet Manga and found him drunk and sprawled out on the gap-tiled floor of the mailroom in the apartment house where he lived. His half-open eyes wearily assessed my presence. "You are my American translator?" Rattled from his body. "I am a poet of death." He then slobbered on. "I've lost my readers. Ich bin a poet von Teut. Ich habe verloren meine Lehren." He twitched at my feet. Above him, a tag with printed letters ID'd the little slot inset on each mailbox along the sweep of the tarnished brass. Each box had the same floral perforation and a little white buzzer slightly lit under a skeletal keyhole. Some boxes wedged askew as if somebody had tried to pry them open. I kneeled, trying to revive him, patting, rubbing, tapping. I exhaled Yiddish into the spidery red threads of his ear, but he didn't come around any further. I was at a loss, terrified. What should I do now? How should I handle him? I couldn't just leave him there. What about our appointment? A Jewish man came into the mailroom, sighing to me in Yiddish. This has happened more than once. We dragged and steered Manga and held him up against the wall of the elevator and made it to his apartment. We managed to flop him safely onto his bed, and I loosened his clothes. The man left me alone with Manga, who slowly came around, his bleary eyes now sorted and focused. Eventually, he badgered again. "So you're going to translate me? Rivlin says I can trust you. Have you been to Romania?" I worked up. "No, I have been to your Romania." "I've heard of a people." He floated out to me as if in some faraway place. "We've lost your poet, but never of a poet who's lost his people." What was his wit? He trembled and frightened now. Where was I? Just yesterday, I wondered What English did I find to bring over his poetry? How can I handle the rhymes of his ballads and those Balkan nicknames of his biblical characters? Thank you. Okay, Harry.
Richie, you doing one more or what?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you very much, Richard. That was a nice series of interwoven poems. Okay. Next up, we're going to hear the poetry of Marcia Karp. She has poems and translations in English and American journals and anthologies, including the TLS, Agenda, The Guardian, Harvard Review, Ploughshares, Catullus and Petrarch in English by Penguin Publishers, The Word Exchange, Anglo-Saxon Poems in Translation by Norton, Joining Music with Reason, 34 Poets, British and American, Oxford 2004, 2009, Waywiser, and her collection, If by Song, Lily Poetry Review Press in 2021. Another prolific poet. We welcome Marcia Karp.
Thank you, Harris, and Richard for setting this up, and Steve and Gary and everyone. Because names are difficult sometimes to hear, I just want to tell you that you're going to hear a name, C-A-I-N, Cain, just so you don't get confused from the beginning. Once again, Cain. Cain again fingered his face for his fault, his protection, the taint of his trespass and blessing, for nobody marked him, nobody knew who he was. He'd thought they would, he wished they would, bereft and alone, unrelated. His father had favored his brother, the fat and the first of the flock put to shame tendered fruit. But he'd been the firstling his father had fathered. He'd grown to love gardens because of his parents. Luxurious stories of love fruit and labors of love were his fables. He'd learned all their lessons, and those the wind whispered to warn him, the least son, he thought, of something desire once did. His gift was good, his father couldn't speak ill of it. If Abel had not fed his flock, the fruit disparaged, despised, despoiled, since father shunned, Cain wouldn't have wished him dead, wouldn't have wondered if wishes could kill when at once Abel died. His parents didn't blame him or know that spilt blood found its tongue in foul accusation, crying, Cain. Someone cried murderer, breaking our mourning. Our service was private, one son and two parents who thought they were the world, who'd dared disturb first grief. Cain went east to a sleepy little land of brothers and mothers and fathers and sons, known now to each other as butchers and bakers and thieves. Cain called himself a student and studied well their manner. He tried his hand at baking. He tried his hand at thieving. He tried to live as if he were a man like any man. He studied well the way love was. He thought he wanted love. He thought he was a kind man. What seemed like love was loneliness cut back, which flourished when she left him. which blossomed when he left her. His gifts were not for love. He grew alone. He grew alone. When someone called him Cain, he heard and Abel echo. Their parents had called them, Cain and Abel, come quickly. Abel and Cain, come look at the stars. They bounded together towards awe. When he visited his parents, their only son now, first and last and least, no more, if ever, outside himself, he had been, he always spoke of Abel, and Eve and Adam were grateful to hear their lost son's name. Eve was immobile, movement was measured, some shadow embodied stayed her steps. In impulse, impossible inches impeded her wanderings. Still, whither she went again, Adam went with her. Walking the garden was work never finished. They'd only one fruit tree, one flower bed now, one rusty patch for the fruits of the earth. Cain was their prize crop now, cared for, though absent. They asked me for nothing, and that's what I answered with. Then I heard Cain on the wind, west to my father I came. Something had happened, and Adam was wholly at war against himself. And not trusting himself, he scrutinized Cain. Cain's was the last love Adam would ask for Eve was unable to love now, and Adam knew no one save Cain. Not needing sleep to dream, Eve awoke to find no one and nothing she knew. Not Eden, not Adam, not even the fruit on their tree could she name. She called Adam torment. Cain fought with his father and knew that his father cried out in secret. Cain had his own fears. He was all Adam, all Eve, all that he was born in the garden. Cain, who lived far from the world of the world, who'd watched, when he'd watched it, encaved in the shadow of Cain, now went to the world with his family. But first he told Adam their flower was frailer than May snow astonished furled seedlings. And Adam, in first grief, let Cain call the world to pluck Eve from his side. And Eve, being told, gathered strength and opposed him. Faultier than a serpent's truth, my child, is your calling. No, 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 no. They waited. The world came to gather, transplant, prop, and sustain her far from their garden. And Cain found him who'd wandered from breath. Cain hurled a rock against a rock to smash the air. My father. Cain didn't wonder if wishes could kill anymore. Abel had died on his own. Still, something stayed Cain from the life he would live, some sentence imposed long ago. In his wanted cell, Cain knew his crime was made fresh by the death of his father. The rigors of his death condemned the vigor of his son to spend itself amazed and fruitless. Cain held his parent fast and faultless. Distant kindred cursed Cain's grief. Then Cain must tell Eve as she lay among strangers, Mother, he's dead. By his hand, yes. And mother, yes, mother me now. So Eve knew but couldn't say how. The body of Adam was buried in bellies of beast-denied Eden. Its flesh and its bowels, its eyes were decayed in the maws of the beast Adam, Cain, Abel had named. And sometimes straight on the wind came his father to Cain, his scent or his whisper, his laugh, sigh, or air of him, the father of old. Cain had loved when a young son, the first of men in his world. Nor kindness nor kin to Eve now was Cain. Go, I could kill you. Eve now in her turn sought his harm. Help me, I'll bite you, help me. And his weeping for Abel, his weeping for Adam, were titters in paradise next to this weeping, it seemed to him now. Eve began her song, and Cain sang in return, so he might not remember his silence towards Adam. Can you lift me up, my dear son? Oh no, dear mother, why? To carry me round so the people can see. It would make the people cry. Like a child in my arms, sweet mother, I'd bring you round the town, and old friends then could look again for what they knew when you were you. Can you go to hell, my dear son? It won't take long to go. Eve might call for Adam or Abel. She called most for Cain, her companion, her keeper, who kept her pieces together. He'd say, if only I, oh mother, believe me. Cain went out when she cried, comfort me, Cain. Once, long ago, Eve told him the story of Cain. The child you were, Cain, convicted himself of being a child, a person, alive. We meant to acquit you of cumbrous charges that grew as you grew, but we saw our slip of a boy propagate opposition to himself. As Eve was speaking, what came back to Cain was his infant guilt, cunning and craven. His crimes were exempted by pitying parents from penalty, or some doubt he'd discharge his debt if his payments were few and small, kept him on trial for his faults, for his trials, for his doubt, from the first judgment due, and forever, it seemed. A woman taunted Eve, Abel was. Harris, could you not do that, please? Abeless, Adamless, less than Eve, Eve. Cain in a lie said the taunts were for him. Even then she knew and said no. Then they called Cain one day. Eve was destroyed in a fall, pushed by the taunter in full knowledge of harm. Cain had to remind himself, fresh in the loss of Adam, that his loss was not the sum of Eve's life. She called and called for a girl she'd been a girl with, or Adam. When Eve told Cain she had spoken with Adam, Cain was resigned. Tell my father, dear mother, I miss him. When Eve would raise her hand to herself, Cain was unkind. He went to the strangers who tended to Eve and asked them to care, for he thought her unfair, though Eve was diminished and he hated her then. Again and again, Cain scratched for its roots, yet he couldn't follow his mark. Its tangle of runners defeated him. He always meant not to, but often did, discount not his weight, but the weight the world held him in. Like that time his father, he'd thought, had favored his brother. He kept Eve alive because he was lonely. They called Cain too late, and he came to Eve, now empty of air, save the fetid wind-trapped, sickening her son, when all that Eve was but flesh went. Cain couldn't conceive again ever containing the wash and the whip he'd once held to be life, held with pure having, not naming the hold on him. He felt now not nothing, but seldom, remembering some pleasure, some grief, some puzzle of pride. He who'd brought Adam and Eve, who'd brought Abel, a delicate language they'd learned, for they loved him, lived level and lone now. Fate again fingered Cain's face, that no one might know Cain, save Cain. Thank you.
I can't hear. Is that me?
Harris,
Unmute.
you're muted, Harris.
Harris, you're muted. Unmute yourself.
Hold on. There we go. Now, when I was saying that was a spellbinding narrative, and it made the whole story very full of humanity and very empathetic, and also treated Cain quite with a certain compassion, and very, very well written, and it's very caught up in the telling. Thank you very much, Marcia.
Thank you, Harris.
Anyway, next up is Gary White. Gary, I always mispronounce your name. Is
Think
it
of
White?
think of the past tense of white.
Whited. Yeah, that's
Exactly.
that's what I always thought it was. Okay. Gary Whited is a poet, philosopher, psychotherapist, and dancer. His book, Having Listened, won the 2013 Homebound Publications Poetry Contest. 2015, it was translated into Russian. His new book, Being There, includes his translation of the ancient poem of Parmenides. His poems have appeared in Salamander, Plain Songs, The Aurorian, Atlanta Review, The Red Letters, and Comstock Review. I give you Gary Whited.
Thank you, Harris. Thank you. And thank you, Marcia, for that amazing rendering of that ancient story. Beautiful. And thank you, Richard, for your poems and for inviting me to join into this reading. I'm very grateful to be here and to share poems from the book, Being There, the new book. I'll share some poems of the prairie and also some of the translation of the fragments of Parmenides, and how one says that. I've always said it in the anglicized way, Parmenides, but I've been talking to a new friend from Athens, and I'm understanding that the name, the way they would say it, is Parmenides. And George maybe can help us render that more correctly than I can. But anyway, when I went to grad school to study philosophy, I was drawn to the ancient Greeks, and in particular Parmenides and the other pre-Socratics. And what happened for me when I started translating the fragments of Parmenides was I was flooded with memories of the prairie, which I went back to and recognized that something was resonating for me about what the experience had been on the prairie for me as a boy growing up out there, and the sense of things happening for which I didn't have words when I was growing up there. And when I read Parmenides and his text from 2,500 years ago, I started feeling like there were words, there was a language, there was a felt sense as well as a conceptual sense of how to make meaning, how to make sense of, or how to narrate some of what I had experienced as a kid on the prairie. So let me start with a couple of prairie poems. How I Remember You. Standing by a fence post, puzzled, dazzled by its grains worn smooth from the hairy hides of cows pressing against the post as they pass, red, white-faced Herefords, quiet when they walk, but for the dry hoof clack in summer, the high-pitched squeak of frozen snow under hoof in winter. Here you stand beside the corner post, more exposed than most, harvesting your delight in the surprise of smoothness coming from whatever rough edge has afflicted someone, maybe you. Your cheek or your palm warmed by the sun-warmed smooth place, your gaze fixed there as though your life depends on it. There are lots of poems about fence posts. And here's a poem that comes from my memories of learning to milk the milk cow. It's called The Fly and Me. The fly buzzing at the hayloft door when I was a boy, and landing silent on the board above the door. Is she still there, if I remember her? Or the one that landed on the edge of the milk bucket when I was learning to milk the cow, and I watched her walk all around the pail's edge, feeling intimate with this creature as she made her way around the rim held tight between my knees, the milk hissing and foaming into itself, each of us in quest of a next meal in this barn where the fly would likely spend her entire life, while I had not yet begun to imagine mine. So that's me on the prairie. I'm going to now shift to the first fragment of Parmenides' poem. We have fragments. We have about 19 fragments of Parmenides' poem. And this first fragment is the narrative of a journey to the other world for which Parmenides is famous. And he was trained in the practice of stillness by the Phakean ancestors that he was part of. And in this practice of stillness, the practitioner would take whoever had appealed to them to make a journey to the other world. They would be taken into a lair, like an animal lair, where there was no light, no sound, and there may well have been substances, plant substances that were hallucinogenic involved in the journeying, but the aim was to journey to the other world. And many people have reflected on this. And one of the things that I have learned through somebody else's scholarship is that there were basically two reasons why someone would want to journey to the other world. One was for personal healing. The other one was to go to the other world to be given healthy laws by the beings from the other world, to bring these healthy laws back to the community and to govern the community with. And when I visited the place where Parmenides lived in southern Italy a couple of years ago, it was clear, and I'd known this from my research, but it was clear at the site of the ruins where he lived that he was famous and well known for his capacity to govern well. So I want to just pause for a moment in acknowledgement of all that we're in the midst of these days in terms of governance, and how it feels like there's a profound absence of good governance. In Parmenides' time, his participation in the governance led to a time of peace that lasted for 2 centuries. So on behalf of all the people suffering the the ways governance is going these days, I'd like to dedicate this first fragment to them in kind of a prayer for good governance and perhaps for guidance from the other world. So, Parmenides, fragment 1. Horses carry me as far as my longing can reach. Transport me to the many-voiced road of the goddess that carries the one who listens through vast silence. On that way I am carried, for the very wise horses know where to go. They pull the chariot at full gallop, and maidens lead the way. An axle blazes in its sockets, urged forward at both ends by its whirling wheels, sends forth the eerie sound of a whistle you hear traveling to the other world. These young women, daughters of the sun, as they leave the house of night, throw back veils from their faces with their hands and hasten to convey me into the light. There stand the gates of the ways of night and day, enclosed with a lintel above and a stone threshold below. These ethereal gates themselves are covered with great doors whose alternating bolts are held fast by Dike, goddess of justice, who lets nothing past her. Speaking gentle words, the maidens cunningly persuade her to swiftly push back the bolted holder from the great doors. As those gates fly open, they spin on their bronze axles fitted by nails and rivets, turn in their sockets, one then the other, to make a wide opening. Straight through them, the maidens guide the chariot and horses along the broad way. The goddess welcomes me warmly, takes my right hand with her right hand, addresses me, and speaks this story. O youth, linked with immortal charioteers, and with horses carrying you to our home, welcome. It is not at all an evil fate sending you forth to come this way, far from the beaten paths of humans, but rather it is your nature, the order of things, and your deep urge to listen. It is necessary that you hear all things, both the untrembling heart of well-rounded truth and the opinions of mortals, which hold no true belief. Nevertheless, you will listen to these also, how it is necessary that things as they appear be acceptable, as they continually penetrate all things. So one of the things I'm struck by in that passage is what I regard more and more as I work with Parmenides as a kind of an exhortation to listen. So I mentioned that a couple of years ago, I traveled to southern Italy and visited the place of Parmenides' village, and the ruins there. And the next poem I want to read comes from that visit. It's called Touched by Stones. I walk where Parmenides walked, among the ruins of walls fallen since his time. Stones that remain because they can, because they are stones, and in their way speak something we cannot know, but be touched by if we listen in stone. Better maybe to say they stone, give them the power and standing of a verb, one among the many, chiseled down to a noun, spoken over and over. That way we turn verbs nouns, repeating them until they fall down, as those walls have fallen. And now we mostly only remember the way a noun might remember the verb it was when first spoken, spoken into being. I feel the stones awaken, begin, how odd, to listen, or I imagine it so. Could it be they recall through my seeing, my listening, and my imagining how it was they came to be the walls that once stood here upright and sturdy, each one lifted by gifted hands, placed on top of the stone beneath, becoming a house, a bath, a temple, these walls. I see him, clear as day, Parmenides walking among the tilted stones, offering his right hand in welcome. And I don't quite know if I imagine it, remember it, or if he walks here too, right now, beside this water that flows from the spring above that gave this place its name, Haela. So, I'm going to move now to fragment 8, which is probably it is the longest fragment of all the fragments we have. And it's the fragment in which Parmenides offers his sense, I think of it as his poetic enactment of the nature and the sense of being as such that he had. And, in Western philosophy, as it's developed over the years, and people have reflected back on the ancients, they talk about this being Parmenides' metaphysics. But in our time, we use the word metaphysics as a noun. And I want to just say, I think when Parmenides was making his poem, metaphysics was still a verb. So in that spirit, I want to read just a few pieces from the fragment 8. I won't read the whole thing, but here's how it begins. And one utterance of the way still is left, that it is. Listen to this. On this way are very many signs that being is birthless and indestructible, for it is whole-limbed and unmoved and without end. Not ever was it, or will it be, since it is now all at once, one, continuous. And a little later, neither is being divisible, since it is all the same. Neither is there more here or less there, which could prevent it from holding together. But all is completely full of being. Listening to this, we hear it all at once, since all is continuous with itself, for being draws near to being. Unmoved in limits of great bonds, being is without beginning and without end. Since Genesis and destruction have been made to wander very far away, true listening drove them away. And I want to just draw attention to the relationship there between listening and being. And my sense is that Parmenides is inviting us to notice that our true listening is our way of approaching being in terms of being able to be in its presence, make sense of being as such. So the last piece I'll read here is this wonderful passage where he says, being is complete from every side, like the body of a well-rounded sphere, equal in the struggle from the middle in all directions. Something about that image, I love that image. So I want to just take us back, just two more pieces I'll read. I want to take us back to the prairie. Here's a poem, again, coming from my memory of being the kid on the prairie, and I would spend hours in the hayloft of the barn looking at things and this is from that experience. And I use the word mote in the poem, and I'm referring to a particle of dust. That's what mote means here. It's probably evident. So this poem is called An Unexpected Quiet. I watch dust motes float in the hayloft when afternoon light slants against our barn's west side and streams through cracks between its shrinking weathered boards. If I keep my gaze on one of those streams of sunlight, sooner or later, a single particle of dust moves as if weightless through that stream, ignites for a moment into an orb of light that fills the entire loft, me inside it, with an unexpected quiet. Its touch as delicate as oats in the nearby bucket. So I would like to close with one short piece that is not in the book. It's from some of the writing I've been doing recently, which involves a dialogue that I've entered into with Parmenides. The dialogue always begins with me addressing Parmenides, often with a question, and then I just listen to hear what I take to be Parmenides' response. So here's one of those dialogues, and here's my question to Parmenides on this particular day. Parmenides, what's next in this venture of writing with you and with myself and the crick and the wind and the dusty fields? And here's Parmenides' response. What's next comes as wind comes, as dust moves, as fields of oats ripen into their music, rustling to winds and gravity's shared rhythm. What's next comes like grapes turned wine, like wine turned blood, like sin turned forgiven, like lust turned desire, turned love. What's next comes like the idea tucked inside the hatband circling your head, like the first time the thought of being as such grabbed you by the thighs, the gut, and turned your feet toward metaphysics, took it back from your head where thoughts wander with no feet to carry them home. What's next comes like ore from earth, like heat to the bucket where pours the ore to melt, to sizzle, to bear itself, to find its strength unburdened by the layers that buried it from anyone's sight but yours, and your thighs, and your soft hips swathed in hands not yours. And you took it for love, or touch, or hope until you didn't, and the ore's bucket cooled, and the hatband broke, and memories spilled of wind, of dust, of music, of your longing, and your own gravity held you steady. Thank you. Thank you. It's so nice to take in your listening, and I so appreciate your being here with your listening. So much appreciation. It looks like we've lost Harris. So.
Hey, Harris, wake up.
I have finished, Harris. I'm done with my reading.
What a fantastic lineup, the three of you. Thank you for such amazing reading.
Thank you,
amazing.
Hillary.
Each one of you. Each one of you, yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Hillary.
You're muted again, Harris.
Can we have another round of applause, please, for Richard Fein, Marcia, Karp, and Gary Whitehead? So, Shira, you wanted to start on the open mic? Shira? Is she there?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you. It's a pleasure to read on open mic surrounded by so many distinguished poets. Recently, I translated a book by Jose Enrique del Monte, my friend from the Dominican Republic. Jose Enrique is an architect, an essayist, and a poet. He's a double PhD in literature and also in architecture. I'll read one of the poems I translated by Jose, titled, "Someone Said We Are Different." The earth divides into as many parts as the sum of pores of the inflamed crowd that can inhale a line that is a mark that places you on one side or the other and forces you to look like the one left on the side. Some universes do not touch because they become alleys to a rough oblivion. I don't know. When I stand on the edge, I see both sides as equal. Someone destroys the conviction I assume to tell me that banners wave horizontally, that caterpillars meet at the top and retreat in a line to the grassland where the germinal butterfly died. If you ever have a dialogue in a hole, you will hear the fiercest words that you still cannot decipher. It is the conversation between anathemas amidst the haughtiness that symbolizes otherness. Furthermore, some colors are not yours. They do not belong to you. Shadows that shelter the siestas of those who have won the metals of oblivion. Colors in versions of the deepest densities that once floated toward both sides. There is insecurity when you want to affirm your steps in the diluted mark of the self. It resembles the bittersweet of intermittent things, where you direct your gaze or your tongue. Sometimes there is pain that is not yours, but the cries of others are contagious until you lose your extremities. You let go when you suffer. You wallow when it hurts. You become empty when filled with so much hatred toward so many possibilities of hell over layers of what has gone on before us. The earth is wet when only a single drop can settle down in the cracks where life persists. On one side, at least one jasmine blooms, nourished by roots that support the other part. On one side, paths are moistened and are flooded by hope. On one side only is the possibility of a tomorrow or the certainty that courage will sprout. On one side, the immense solitude where nothing is so true as the hand that prohibits rest. There are so many universes that cannot touch because they die instantly, like jasmine dies when it is moistened.
Thank you, Shira.
You're welcome.
Who would like to read next? Chris?
All right. Thank you, Harris. Thank you. This poem, I think Harris may have heard me read before, but it will be new to others, I trust. One of my brothers is a doctor, and it has become kind of a family tradition to donate our bodies to the med school where he studied. So this is to a medical student dissecting my cadaver. You're sure to see me from some angle I myself could never wangle, and I can't guess how much respect it's reasonable to expect, as all my scars and imperfections yield to your intimate inspections. In your shoes, I might deride me while I looked around inside me, eyeing the organs I abused by what I didn't use or used. So feel entitled to a joke about the flesh you slice and poke. Saving lives and easing pain are worthwhile skills you hope to gain from what my innards can reveal. If laughter aids that, no big deal. I will be too deceased to mind your quip about what you might find. Someday, your manner by the bed of any patient who's not dead will feature sober empathy, but cut yourself some slack with me. Thank you.
Is there somebody else who would like to read? I didn't see anybody's name in chat. Nobody? Hello? Well, if I'll give it one more minute and one more call. Is there anybody else who would like to read before I wrap it up? No? Okay, well, I'll close with one poem. This is a revision of a poem that some of you may have heard, but the tone of it is quite different. It's called Almost a Poet. Once upon a clock in a wound down time, tick, tock, an hour starved to shadow, nibbled and nicked by razor seconds that flowed through a slit in its fabric. Tick, tock. A bullet built a nest in a young soldier's brain, a youth so certain of forever. Tick, tock. Only the old volunteered lead foot breaks the called halt to breath. Tick, tock. Death's surprise etched his eyes, strange to find a wildflower field to nevermore. Tick, tock. In his mud-caked carcass, medics found half-finished poems. Tick, tock. Verses penned in a dim light's halo, no closure, no end. Tick, tock, unless a home flare the window of a soul with compass wings to dress new stanzas in bone and flesh. Tick, tock, tick. Anyway, I want to say thank you again to our wonderful features, Richard Fein, Marcia Karp, and Gary Whitehead, with apologies to Gary. And I've been battling some things that I won't discuss, but anyway, no excuses. Anyway, and thank you.
No problem, Harris. No problem.
Thank you to our limited open mic readers, and many thanks to those who zoomed
so
in.
Limited.
Huh?
I said, oh, so limited.
And thank you all for zooming in, and we'll be back again the third Tuesday in April in time for Poetry Month.
And thank you, Steve.
We hope to see you then.
Thank you, Harris. Thank you so much.
Take good care, everybody, and be safe. Stay well and be safe. Good night, everybody.
Good night. Good night.